Our schools, our financial systems, our media, a lot of us have this feeling that they're just broken. But what if they aren't? What if they're actually working perfectly, just not for us? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this hidden architecture of control. It's a blueprint that shapes our world in ways you're about to see absolutely everywhere.
Now this quote, this isn't from some dystopian novel. It's a real statement from the Rockefeller-funded General Education Board way back in 1906. Perfect docility. Molding hands. I mean, wow. The idea that our systems are intentionally designed for a specific purpose, it starts right here.
And that really leads us to the big question we're going to tackle today. It's a question that, once you get the answer, reveals a pattern that you will not be able to unsee.
Okay, let's start with a place we've all spent thousands of hours, school. We're going to take apart this familiar factory model and see exactly how it was designed for obedience.
Just think about the structure of traditional school for a second. We're all batched by age, right? Not by what we're good at. Bells tell us when to move, just like a shift change in a factory. Everyone gets the same standardized curriculum, and the teacher is the absolute authority at the front of the room. Look, this was never a design meant to cultivate genius. It was a model borrowed from Prussia, funded by industrialists like Rockefeller, specifically to create a compliant workforce.
Yeah, the explicit goal was to train workers for an industrial society. And the result of that? Well, there's a famous NASA study on creativity that found 98% of 5-year-olds test at genius levels of creative thinking. But after years in this system, by the time we're adults, that number plummets to just 2%. It was literally engineered to produce people who could show up on time, follow orders, and do the same thing over and over again, perfect for an assembly line.
Okay, now let's completely switch gears and jump into the world of money. But as we go through this, I want you to listen for that echo, that same pattern.
So at the very top of our financial system, you have a central authority. In the US, that's the Federal Reserve, a private entity that gets a total monopoly on creating and controlling the nation's money. Just notice the architecture here. It's centralized and it is top-down.
So, how is all this money actually made? Mostly through debt. When you or the government takes out a loan, new money is basically just typed into existence. What that means is our entire economy is built on a foundation of debt. Nearly every single dollar is owed back to a bank, plus interest. It's a system built on obligation from the ground up.
And here is the totally predictable result. This chart shows absolutely staggering levels of debt compared to the size of our economy. I mean, look at those bars for both private and government debt. They're just towering over everything. This isn't some accident. It's the inevitable outcome of a system designed this way.
So let's just pause for a second. A centralized authority, making top-down decisions inside a system based on compliance and obligation. Does that ring any bells? All right, it's time to connect the dots. We've seen this pattern pop up in education, we've seen it in economics, so now let's finally give a name to the two fundamental blueprints that are running our world.
This slide, right here, this is the core of it all. On the left, you've got control systems. They're centralized, top-down, usually opaque, and they're really designed to benefit the designers. Think of the factory school, think of the central bank. And on the right, you have development systems, distributed, bottom-up, transparent, and designed to benefit the actual participants. We're going to get into these more, but you might want to pause and just soak in the contrast here.
And here is the main takeaway of this entire explainer. The architecture isn't random. It is the cause. The outcomes we see in our schools, in our economy, and in so many other places are the direct effect of that underlying design. So if that's the problem, what's the alternative? Let's take a look at what happens when you intentionally design a system for human development.
In education, a development model looks something like this. Think of Montessori schools or the Finnish system. Students move on when they've mastered a concept, not just because they got older. Their own curiosity drives their learning. And teachers are more like facilitators, not just lecturers. The whole focus shifts from compliance to competence.
And in economics, the alternatives are just as powerful. We see this in local currencies that keep wealth inside a community, in credit unions that are actually owned by their members, and even in huge worker-owned businesses. Power and ownership are distributed to the people, not concentrated at the top. This table really just lays it all out. It's the same pattern with the same predictable outcomes. A control system in education, you get crushed creativity. A development system, you get engaged learners. In economics, one extracts wealth,
The other builds up local resilience. And hey, look at that third row, media. The control model is corporate consolidation. Just 6 companies own 90% of US media, which leads to narrative control. The result? A recent Gallup poll showed only 32% of Americans trust the mass media. The alternative, a development model, gives us diverse perspectives through independent, reader-supported journalism. The architecture is the cause.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Really, it's about learning to see the design in the first place and understanding that we have a choice as the architects of our own future.
Just consider this one number for a second, 97%. That is how much buying power the US dollar has lost since the Federal Reserve, a classic control system, was created. That's not a bug, it's a feature of its design.
And this is probably the most critical insight of all. When we complain that our systems are broken, we're kind of missing the point. They are functioning perfectly according to their design. A system designed for control will produce control. A system designed to extract wealth, well, it's going to extract wealth.
And what this means is that trying to fix these problems by just putting better people in charge of the same old system is like trying to redesign a house by just changing the curtains. Real lasting change means we have to address the fundamental architecture itself.
So I'll leave you with this question. Now that you can see this pattern, this difference between control and development architectures, where else in your life does it show up? At your job? In your community? And maybe the most important question of all, which systems are you choosing to build and live inside?